Hi there, Mr. Thompson here with a video math lesson. Today looking at rounding and using decimals. Just how to use what decimals are and how they work and how to round decimals. Okay, so we're going to be looking at rounding decimals to the nearest decimal place or to the nearest significant figure as well. I'm not sure if that's going to be a second video or not, but we'll see how long we go. But rounding in general. Okay, so let's kind of look at an example to figure out what we're talking about here. First of all, what are decimal places? Okay, this number here, 2,496.0194. Each of these numbers is in a particular decimal place, okay, and therefore gives the number a different value. So, for example, this is the ones place. So there's 6 ones, right? That's what this 6 says. And here is the tens place. So there's 9 tens, which is 90, which is why we say 2,496. Okay, we've got hundreds place, thousands place. Then we go on the other side of the decimal point. We have the tenths place, so 0 tenths, right? And then hundredths. And here they're getting, when we were going this way, they were getting bigger and bigger. And now we're getting smaller and smaller. Thousandths. 10,000ths, and it goes on, right? And we're going to be rounding, in different problems you'll be asked to round to, say, a particular, 2 decimal place, or or to the nearest hundredth, which means the same thing, right? Or to the nearest hundred, right? All kinds of things. So these are the decimal places, right? The first decimal place, the tenths is the first decimal place, hundredths is the second, and then third and fourth decimal place, and so on. Okay? So, here are some steps to follow for rounding. Alright? The first step is to locate the digit in the required decimal place. So if you need to round to the third decimal place, then in this case it would be the 9, right? It's in that third decimal place after the decimal point. If it's to the nearest 10, right, then it's this 9, different 9. If it's to the nearest whole number, then that's the 6. It's in the ones place. Okay. The next step is to round. There's kind of a 2a and 2b. So you either round down, which means you just leave the number as is. So if we were rounding to the nearest third decimal point, decimal place, this 9, we would round it down because the next digit is 4. And if it was less, or 3 or 2 or 1 or 0, we would round it down. What that means is it just stays the same. Okay, so that 9, to round it down, it just stays as a 9. Okay? Or, alternatively, we would round it up, which means move it up by 1, if the next digit is 5 or more. So if we wanted to round this to the nearest hundredths place, or the second decimal place, 2 decimal places, we look over here and the next digit is more than 5. If it was 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, then we increase this by 1. So this would actually become a 2. Okay? This one would become a 2. And then the last step is remove all digits that follow. Okay? Unless you're rounding over here. The one exception to that is if you're rounding to the nearest 100, right, that would be this 4, and it would become a 5. Okay, you can't remove these 2 because then it would just be 24, so we just make them 0. Okay, they just become 0. So there you go. After the decimal point, you can remove them because we don't need these. If they just become zeros, they're kind of unnecessary, right? And when we round, we don't want to put extra zeros because that kind of makes it look like we have a very, very precise answer, which we'll talk more about when we get to significant figures. Okay? So let's do some examples. Here's that same number. Let's round it to the nearest 2 decimal places. Okay? So here's the second decimal place. Here, the 1, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the one after it. We've already kind of talked about this. We're going to look at the one after it. It's a 9, so that means it's going to round up. So we write everything before the 1. And since this is a 9, we're going to move it up 1. It's going to become a 2. Okay, and we don't need any numbers afterwards, so that's the answer. Okay, let's round it to the nearest thousandth. Okay, This time it's that 9 is in the thousandth place. So we can write everything up till the 9. The question is, what do we write for the 9? So we look at the next digit. It's a 4. So that means we round down because it's less than 5. So that means the 9 just stays the same. Okay. Let's round it to the nearest tens, the nearest 10. Okay. The tens place. This time it's this 9. That 9 is in the tens place. And we're going to look at the number next to it. It's a 6, which is more than 5. So it's going to round up. So we write 2 and then 4. And then instead of a 9, right, we're going to put kind of a 10 there. But that needs to change. That's why I put it in brackets. Because we can't put a 10. We can only put one digit there, and 10 is a 2-digit number. So what we're actually going to do is the 4. It's kind of like borrowing the 4 that was here actually becomes a 5, and then we put the zeros afterwards. So even though we were rounding to the nearest 10, the closest 10 is actually 2,500. Okay, so that's rounding. Some examples of rounding. All right, we'll keep going here. 6 minutes in, and we'll talk about significant figures. Okay, now significant figures can be a little bit confusing. They're mostly used in practical applications, or particularly in science. Okay. In order to talk about what significant figures are, I thought I'd use an example of a bag of sugar. Okay, if you buy a bag of sugar at the supermarket, it might say on it that it's a 750-gram bag of sugar, okay, or box or whatever. Now, when in the factory, when they're packaging this sugar, they don't measure it out exactly 750 grams. They just fill up the bag pretty much, and they might have some measuring system, but they're not worried about getting exactly 750. They just kind of fill up the bag more or less, and it's going to be somewhere close to 750. It might be 752 or it might be 746, okay, but it's somewhere close to 750 grams. Okay, if you put that on, and now this, we'll get there in a second, but this has two significant figures, because this 0 really, like we said, it could actually be in any given bag. It could be a 2, it could be something different. So the significant figures are the 7 and the 5. Those are the ones, we're just saying it's pretty close to 750 grams. So here we have two sort of what you might call important or significant digits here. Significant figures, often called significant figures. If let's look at a different scenario. If we put this on a scientific scale and measured it, then we might get a different answer, because the scale can be more precise. It might say, hey, this is actually 752 grams. Okay, and there are 3 digits, 3 figures, 3 significant figures in here, because the scale is telling us, no, it's not 750 grams, although it is close. So this is still not wrong, but this is simply more precise. Okay, so it's got 3 figures of precision, 3 significant digits. If you had a really good scale, okay, you might be able to look and say, well, this actually is 752.036 grams, if you could really measure it very accurately. Okay, and that has 6 significant figures. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we've got some steps here that we're going to write for rounding. This is kind of what hopefully this gives you an idea of what significant figures is about. Okay, and what you might be asked to do in math class or in science or who knows what, you might be asked to round to a particular significant figure. The first step to doing that is to find the first non-zero digit of your number. Okay, and we'll look at an example in a second. So find the first non-zero digit, and using that digit as the first in a series, using that digit as the first, count out the desired number of digits required. So the problem might say, or somebody might tell you, okay, we want 2 significant figures. So you start at your first non-zero digit and go 1, 2, or 3 or 4, or whatever is required. Okay. Then you're going to just round, as in just plain rounding, as we looked at before. Okay. After that, you put any zeros, any digits that remain on the left side of the decimal point. can become a 0, and after the decimal point, any remaining digits can just be taken off. Okay, let's look at an example of this. Okay, these are the steps. Let's look at an example. So we're going to round a number to maybe a few numbers to 3 significant figures. Okay, so the first one is 347,602. So as the instructions said, we find our first non-zero digit, which in this case is 3. Okay, and we want to round to 3 significant figures. So our first one is 3, and we're going to go 1, 2, 3. Here's 3 digits. We just count that. That's the first one. 2, 3. Okay, that's our third one. So that's 7 is the number where we want to round. So we want to round to the nearest of that number. So we look to this one. It's a 6, which is more than 5, and rules of rounding say this one needs to go up. So we're going to write the 3 and the 4 don't change. Okay, the 7 becomes an 8. Okay, because this 6 is bigger than 5, the 7 becomes an 8, and as the rules say, the rest of these digits just become 0. Okay, we don't put any decimal point. Okay. All right, next example. We've got 1.0321. Our first non-zero digit is 1, and then we're going to count 1, 2, 3. Okay, of course, different problem might say 4, so you might, go out to here or whatever. But for our example, we just want 3 significant figures, so 1, 2, 3. We're going to round that 3. Okay. Now we can write the 1.0. All right, and then we're going to figure out what the 3 is going to become. And so we look to the next number. It's a 2, which is less than 5. So we round down. The 3 stays the same. Okay, we don't need to put any numbers afterwards because we're to the right of the decimal point. It's just 1.03. Okay. Last example, and then we'll finish this video, which, as I suspected, is getting a bit long. 0.020140. Okay, the first, you might have thought it was funny to find the first non-zero digit. In these ones, it was a bit trivial. But here, our first non-zero digit is actually that 2. Okay, so 2 and then 1, 1, 2, 3 digits over is this 1. Okay, and it's going to get, that 1 is going to be the one that gets rounded. Okay, so we can write 0.020, everything up until that 1, which is getting rounded. And we look over here and we see the 4, and so the 1 rounds down, it stays the same. Okay. Even though this was a 9, which would round the 4 up to 5, we still round the 1 down because we just look at this other one. This 9 doesn't really actually matter. Okay? So there you go, rounding significant figures. Good luck. See you next time.